You don't know what you're talking about. The UN
were we invading a country in Iran on 9/11? No.
Can I finish the sentence,
or were we at war with
or are you
anybody
just
in the
going to
Middle East
interrupt?
during 9/11?
Okay.
The answer is no. We were asleep at the wheel on 9/11. There's a reason why John Ashcroft wrote a book called Never Again, because we were so asleep at the wheel that we realized afterwards we can never allow it to happen again.
When Madeleine Albright was asked about how the UN had estimated that 500,000 children had died of starvation and malnutrition due to the Clinton blockade around Iraq, she said, and I quote, "That price is worth it." These were the non-interventionist years of peace and prosperity.
What? 92, 93, 94? We're talking about 2001. That's a long ways off, bro. I said, what were we doing when 9/11 happened in the Middle East? In the Middle East on 9/11.
Try 1998.
Almost 2 decades
earlier. No, I'm talking about 3 years earlier. You don't know what you're talking about.
And you said that Madeleine Albright said that in the early 90s. You just said 90s on the show.
I didn't
2001
say, I said in the 90s.
Is when 9/11 happened. Am I wrong?
1998 is when she made the comment. It was all through the Clinton years. Bill Clinton stopped being president in the year 2000, 1 year before 9/11. Sorry,
so you're saying that the blockade of food is what caused 9/11 now?
No, I'm not saying it. Osama bin Laden himself listed it as one of his stated grievances, along with the military bases.
One of a list that was like the Unabombers list.
Yes, that also involved the U.S. military bases on Holy Land in Saudi Arabia, and U.S. support for brutal regimes that oppress Muslims in the region, and U.S. support for the Israelis, who have been occupying, at that time, for 30 plus years, the Palestinian territory.
One of the most jarring moments in this exchange is Ben Ferguson's claim that the U.S. was doing nothing in the Middle East prior to 9/11. From a historical perspective, this is a massive revisionist swing. Dave Smith correctly counters by pointing out the 1990s were defined by aggressive U.S. intervention, the devastating sanctions on Iraq, the no-fly zones, and the military bases in Saudi Arabia, which bin Laden explicitly cited as his primary motivation. Ferguson's strategy here is to equate non-intervention with ignorance, but in doing so, he ignores the very causal chain that led to the rise of anti-American sentiment. You can't critique a policy of non-intervention by pointing to a time period where that policy didn't actually exist.
Yes,
this is basic history.
You can say I'm a fraud, but you don't know any of this.
Hold on.
You don't know any of this.
So I'm correct in saying that your foreign policy is bury your head in the sand and hope that no one bothers you based on what you just said. Because you're saying anytime we stand up for us in the world, that immediately it's going to be our fault when we get attacked. That is your foreign policy.
Instead of you saying it, why don't I just say what I actually believe? What I believe is that we don't launch wars of aggression, wars of choice, reckless wars against countries that don't pose a threat to us. I'm defending the just war theory of Christianity and the constitutional system that the framers laid out. If we do have to go to war, there should be a vote in Congress.
Okay, so here's my question. To every American that's watching that has lost a loved one at the hands of Iran, you're now telling them when they go to their graves on Memorial Day that Iran was not a threat to the United States of America, as you just described it, and who gives a crap that those American soldiers were killed at the hands of Iran and the terrorist regimes that they aid, sponsor, support, and give free passage to.
Here's a good rule of thumb here, Ben. If I didn't say it and then you just say you're saying it, no, I'm not saying that.
What I'm saying is that we're going to get.
No, I literally didn't say any of that. Yes, that's right. That part I said. Correct.
So to the American families, families who've lost loved ones in a uniform who were killed at the hands of the Iranians and their terrorist proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS and others they gave safe passage to. You're telling me that Iran was not involved in the murder of those American soldiers. They killed more American soldiers than any other regime in the world.
Ben, I'm sorry. I know I'm a fraud and I don't know a lot about foreign policy. Did you just say that ISIS is an Iranian?
There is a moment in this clip that would make any Middle East scholar cringe. Ferguson's attempt to link ISIS to Iran as a proxy. In reality, Iran, a Shia power, and ISIS, a radical Sunni group, are mortal enemies who spent years killing each other on the battlefields of Iraq and Syria. This highlights a common issue in televised foreign policy debates, the flattening of complex, ancient sectarian conflicts into a simple good guys versus bad guys narrative. By oversimplifying the enemy, Ferguson makes the solution seem simple, military force, but he risks advocating for policies based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who is actually fighting whom.
Proxy?
I said that they knew that ISIS was given safe passage to cross through at some points in the past. Yes, that's a fact.
They're a proxy of the Iranians.
I said proxies
yes,
and including
they
places
get along
like ISIS.
So well.
I'm going to go back to asking the simple question I asked you a second ago.
Proxy?
If you are American and your loved one was killed at the hands of the Iranian regime and their terrorist proxies, you're telling me, and you want to look at those families in the face and say Iran is not a threat to the United States of America or our soldiers, even though their loved one died at the hands of the Iranian regime.
Okay, all I ask is that you allow me to answer that question since you've asked it now. Is that cool?
It's a yes or no, but go.
No, it's not a yes or no. I'll give you the answer.
Sure it is.
My answer to all of those families would be, if you had listened to people like me, people like Ron Paul, people like Pat Buchanan, our troops never would have been in Lebanon or in Iraq to begin with, and your loved ones would still be with you. But
watch how Ferguson shifts the goalposts when he loses the historical argument. He pivots to the families of fallen soldiers, essentially asking, how dare you say Iran isn't a threat when our soldiers died at their hands? This is a classic appeal to emotion fallacy. It's a powerful rhetorical shield because it makes the opponent look heartless if they continue to argue. However, Dave Smith's rebuttal is the logical counterpunch. He argues that the best way to honor those soldiers is to stop putting them in harm's way for wars of choice. Ferguson is using the consequence of intervention to justify more intervention, creating a circular logic that is very hard to break in a 60-second TV soundbite.
But instead, you listen to the foreign policy of people like you, Ben, and that's why we were involved in those conflicts to begin with. Iran poses no threat to the United States of America, meaning the middle part of North America. Does Iran pose a threat to our ability to occupy Iraq? Well, actually, we were kind of on the side of the most Iran-linked militia groups at the time. But yeah, there was some fighting with some Shiites in there, too. It was another disastrous war that Piers Morgan was correct to oppose. And none of those boys would have been killed if they had listened to people like Piers.
The entire debate hinges on one word: threat. To Ferguson, a threat is anything that challenges U.S. hegemony or moves against U.S. interests anywhere on the globe. To Smith, a threat is something that actually endangers the physical security of the American mainland. This is why they are talking past each other. Ferguson sees the world as a chessboard where the U.S. must always be on the move. Smith sees it as a hornet's nest where the U.S. keeps poking the hive and wondering why people are getting stung. Ultimately, this isn't just a debate about facts, it's a debate about the very definition of what a national interest is in the 21st century. Does intervention keep us safe, or does it create the very enemies we're told to fear? This drives engagement in the comments.